Emily Dickinson's poem, "The Soul Selects Her Own Society," is believed to have been written in 1862. The poem can be read as a description of the artist's experience. The soul, perhaps a poet, freely chooses to close herself off from the world in order to pursue the solitary interior life of creativity and self discovery. In the first stanza, the speaker describes the soul shutting a door, an image of the individual deliberately closing herself away to pursue some greater purpose. While it might seem that the soul is hiding behind a closed door, there is evidence that the poem's speaker believes her to be exercising the power of personal choice. Chariots pause at her gate, emperors come to visit, but she will not let them in. She is indifferent to these symbols of wealth, romance, and power. The poem's speaker tells us that the soul has closed her attention to everything except one. The one that she has chosen might be interpreted as her own creative vision. The poem concludes by comparing the soul's choice to stone, indicating that it is heavy, solid, and irreversible. Once the soul has closed herself off from the world, there is no turning back. Like many of Dickinson's poems, this poem comments on the soul of the individual and its rejection of the conventions of a larger society. Let's see the summary of the poem. The first two lines introduce the soul as the subject of the poem. Clearly, this soul is feminine, as indicated by the use of the word her. Here, the soul might represent the self, the individual, or the mysterious essence of being. The soul is also subjective. She is an active subject rather than a passive object and relies upon her personal opinions and feelings. The soul selects, meaning that she picks out or chooses her own society. This line can be interpreted in a number of ways. On one level, it might mean that she decides what company she will keep and which social rules she will obey. On a deeper level, it might mean that she chooses the company for her own self over the company of others. Once this selection is complete, she shuts the door or closes herself off. A closed door is a common image in literature which usually represents a block or barrier between the internal and the external world. Dickinson's use of dashes between words and phrases leads to several possible explanations of lines 3 and 4. The lines might mean that the soul is shutting her divine majority inside with her behind the door. In this sense, divine majority might represent her own holy or sacred self, which is now no longer present to those outside of her closed door. Another way to read the lines is that she is shutting her divine majority out of her inner world. In this sense, divine majority could mean the social or religious system to which she is no longer present. The capitalization of the letter M in the word majority might even indicate that she is actually shutting out God, an interpretation that might have seemed blasphemous in the 19th century Americans. In the second quatrain, the speaker gives us examples of the consequences of the soul's choice to shut the world out. In these lines, we see how thoroughly the soul has rejected the symbols of the external world. She has turned away from all the proper customs of the world society. Chariots, perhaps containing potential suitors or wealthy men, stop before her gate. She notices them casually, but she is not interested. She is even indifferent to royalty. The emperor falls on his knees before her door, but she will not let him enter. This is a reversed image because it is usually the common individual who must defer to an emperor. These examples illustrate that the soul's state of being is intensely private, personal, and unreachable. In the last quatrain, the speaker of the poem, using the pronoun I, comments upon the power and determination of the soul. There is a tone of admiration and respect for the soul's discriminating selection process. It is observed that the soul could have had her pick of an ample nation or a more than adequate body of people, but she has chosen just one. The one here might mean her creativity or her art or her private spiritual life. In this interpretation, the soul has given up the rest of the world for an inward life of reflection and self realization. She chooses to close the walls of her attention, with wall perhaps understood according to its archaic definition, either half of a double or folding door. This definition completes the image created by the door in the first quadrant. Once these walls are firmly closed, she is free to forget external matters and concentrate solely on the one thing to which she has devoted her existence. Like stone, she is hardened against the world outside, and her decision is solid, permanent, and complete. In this poem, Dickinson does not present a defense for the person who chooses to live outside of the bounds of public life. She simply states it as a fact, ignoring society's opinions. If her first two lines were any less direct or absolute, if she had said, for instance, the soul sometimes selects her own society, or my soul, or one's soul, it would be somewhat of an admission that this might be unusual behavior, a practice that is not common to everyone. Instead, Dickinson presents this move to inward privacy as an unavoidable part of the human condition. The phrase low gate mentioned in line 6 could be an indication that this individual is not shut off completely from public life and is not beyond being contacted. The fact that the poet took the time to mention a gate that would be easy to pass over shifts the cause of the soul's isolation at least partially onto the public at large. The emperor she uses as a representative of the outside world falls down to his knees, but the poem implies that if he really wanted to breach the division between the public and the private life, he could do it more easily with direct action than with social gesture. The first three words of this poem state Dickinson's case most directly. The word selects implies a decision that is gentle and unpressured, not something that one is forced into or that one does to push back against pressure. It is a word that ignores all of the various elements that one might consider when making a decision and leaves the soul's action entirely up to free will. The rest of the poem, though, is devoted to showing us the outside forces that generally keep one from living alone. The first stanza offers us the fronts that the soul leaves behind by going into seclusion. The majority, having shut friends and acquaintances out of her life, the second stanza has several powerful people in chariots come to call on her, and one, an emperor, even kneels on her mat, implying that his wealth and power are offered to her. Some people would be so attracted to an offer such as this that they would find it too good to pass up, denying that they have free will and the ability to choose, which gives more force to the fact that this soul calmly selects something else. The tone of the final stanza indicates that the speaker is not entirely happy with the idea of cutting herself off and of behaving like stone instead of flesh and blood. This is the strongest argument that another person might choose to justify remaining a part of society, that it is inhuman to shut oneself off like that. The speaker of this poem shows that this point is understood. The cold, thudding final two syllables indicate by their tone just how blunt it is to be. Like stone, but the fear of self-dislike is not enough to change the soul's choice.